All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. Happy Thursday. Today is June 17th. I cannot believe that this month has come in. We're in the middle of it and on the way out, but welcome to another episode. I know, right, Nafisa? Like, first educators were like, wait, what? What is happening? School years have wind down and everything. But welcome to another episode of Brown Girls Sound Off, where we center and amplify the voices of women of color. I am Tony Whitland, and I am joined by my amazing, amazing crew who joins me every Thursday, Edwina, Nafisa, and Chantel. But we have three other amazing guests that I will introduce in a few moments. But really quickly, just to give you a recap, as you all know, if you've been following, we have been talking all about parenting this month. It has been just such an amazing month, full of really thoughtful and insightful conversations about parenting while Black and brown. And so, if you watched the first two episodes, which if you didn't, please stop right now and go back and watch those. But if you watched the first two episodes, you'll know that we started out just really talking about what is unique about the Black and brown parenting experience. And so we talked a little bit about, where we got ideas about parenting from just growing up and things like that. What seems different about being a Black woman, raising Black kids, and so then last week, which was a really hot topic. I mean, if you are in our Bgso group on Facebook, you will know last week, I see some heads nodding. Y'all know last week it was lit in our group, and we were talking primarily about communication. And so we spent some time talking about how it is that we communicate with our kids. Maybe even some ways we encourage them to communicate about us, ways that we're even breaking some generational cycles around communication and what it looks like to be in negotiation with your children rather than just always dictating or telling them what to do, right? So, anyway, tonight we're going to be talking more about parenting, but we needed to bring in some other voices. So, I want to introduce these handsome fellas that you see with us tonight, and in a couple of days it is Father's Day. So, what an amazing time to have some guys with us. So, first, I want to welcome William Batts. William, would you please and tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in the Baltimore area, and I'm all about healing, reconciliation, restoration, whatever it takes to continue the conversation related to mental health in our community. Sometimes it's not so much, it's not thought of as we go to the dentist, we go to the doctor for physicals, but mental health is not really one of those things that we really, think much about. So that's kind of where, what my life is thrown into and where my gifts and talents lie.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the work that you do with our community. I really appreciate that. All right, next I want to welcome Mayo. Mayo, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Alfonso Mayo, but everyone calls me Mayo. I just happen to be the proud father of 5 beautiful kids from the ages of 15 through 3. One of them might make a guest appearance tonight. I can't control it. I'm not even going to stop it, and they might be half naked, so just know that. I also have the privilege of being the founder and servant leader of an organization called Mentor and Mentors, where we teach youth the importance of long-term positive relationship building. And I've been in early childhood education since I was age 14. And so my mission and my passion is really to inspire others to chase after their dream and live up to their full potential. And it is a privilege to be on here with you all.
Oh, thank you so much for being with us. Early childhood education. I do not have experience in that area, even though I am an educator. I see Edwina's like, neither do I. All right, and last but certainly not least, Terrence, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, nothing as lavish as my two esteemed gentlemen, but currently I'm an assistant principal in Baltimore County Public Schools. I'm at a middle school on a middle school level. I am also for my organization. I am in a fraternity, so for my organization, I am the national director of a junior fraternity and sorority program, which is a mentorship based program. So, would you put the two together? I'm all about just serving teens and just trying to help our young men and our young women just make it through school and just, see a better way of life, preferably like, whether that is college bound or entering the career world, but just, being better people. That's my ultimate goal in any capacity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know what? Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Terrence, I don't know if you knew I was an assistant principal too up through last school year.
No, I did not. Okay.
Yes, I was at Friends School of Baltimore, and then now I'm an educational consultant. But yeah,
Okay.
we have that in common. All right. Oh my gosh, look at the wealth of knowledge and experience that we have with us tonight. Thank you again. So I want to jump right into this conversation. So I know that, in our things that I see on social media and even in circles that I run in conversing with folks, there is this idea that, the village that once existed is somehow, is somehow gone, right? I know when I talk about growing up and I think about the ways that I saw neighbors outside, like everyone was sort of involved in parenting. We talked about this, ladies. Y'all remember that? I believe it was episode 1. We talked about this. It seemed like everyone was involved in the rearing of all the children. And so I want to know from your perspectives, I guess I'll start with Mayo, if you don't mind. Like from your perspective, what is the state of the village from what you see?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really, really interesting question to ask. From my perspective, I would say that it's gone. And I say that from a standpoint of, one, a Black father, and also a mentoring program that works directly with youth. A lot of times when we're engaging with youth, we're engaging more with them than we are the families, right? And many youth couldn't even tell you who their next door neighbors are, let alone the person down the block. And so when you think about just community investment in youth, and it's just in its general stances, it's at a dire need to get back to that state, right? And so that's why it's important that we teach our youth the importance of serving one another, right? It's nothing we can do about past generations. We kind of like, hey, I need to do things on my own. But for me, it's all about, hey, if you experience something, why not uplift someone else so that they won't experience this, right? Or if you have a life or shared experience, why not share your experience so other people can be better? And so that notion has changed dramatically from the 70s and 60s. Like when I used to hear my grandparents talk about all of their friends and how they all used to walk to school together, like, and a prime problem is that in my opinion, is social media. It actually was social distance before social distancing. And so now all the kids, they know more about their IG name than their real names. And, like parents are not inviting or engaging other kids. Most of the time, they don't even know who they hang with. And so I would say that it doesn't exist anymore. And it's unfortunate because our kids suffering, and it's something that I think they need. So.
Thank you for that insight. I'm hearing that a lot of folks are actually sharing your sentiment, right? And I think about when you mentioned like kids, in the past, a lot of them walked to school together. That's how I grew up. I grew up in a Park Heights neighborhood, right? And so I walked to school. I mean, I probably was like 5 years old, and the crossing guard is the one who looked out for me, right? Because we walked to school together. We, walked through alleys. And so in turn, when I think about, like the village and like the function of it, like even basic things like resolving conflicts. Well, if you live right across the alley from somebody, then y'all ain't gonna be beefing but so long because you gotta walk to and from school. Like there's so many implications for, as you stated, that village actually being missing, right? And that village being dissolved. There's so many implications for families and for relationships as well. Terrence, I wanna go to you next. So from your perspective, what is the state of the village? And if you want to add some insight in terms of like, what might we do to strengthen it?
So, I mean, I will have to kind of agree with my friend Mayo down there. Like, I definitely think the village, I think a lot of times, so if the village is not gone, it's just quiet. It's very reserved. And sometimes, I mean, the only blessing to me outside of it, the village not necessarily being like your neighbor or down the street or etc., is that you're hoping in some capacity your child gets the village when they go to school, or your child gets the village when they go to their local religious institution. Like sometimes, like with us being more modern, we do have access to a greater village than we don't have access to, but it's just having the right people in those places, like, because now that the village is a little bit larger, I don't want my son being raised by a village or being mentored by a village that doesn't share the same morals and values that I have. And so I think that becomes problematic when we send them to a schoolhouse that's not, and if you're speaking from Black and brown, that's not a majority being led by or being facilitated by people who look like us. And so that's a huge part, because that's a different village. They have a different culture. They have different mannerisms, different activities than we do. And so that's why it's so important for us to, like with Mayo said, to increase the actual old school village, because when they leave our house, they are not around the old school village. And so we do need more neighbors being involved, and, we do need more people promoting peace and positivity. And I mean, I don't even know, do kids even do sleepovers anymore? Like, do kids even, I don't have kids that are that age yet, and so, but I remember growing up, and I would go over my one of my best friend's house every weekend. We would be over there playing games, going to football games, going to the movies, all of these things. I'm like, do kids even have sleepovers anymore? I just don't know. It's just everything is Fortnite, TikTok. So I'll see you later. I'll see you on the game. But yeah, I think it's very reserved. And to answer your second question, I think the only way we can really keep it, as like I said before, is we can't, like Mayo said, we gotta kind of forget about what was done and what was going on previously, and we gotta be more involved in our kids and more involved in our neighbors' kids, like going out to meet them, going out like the old days when somebody would move in and you would go drop off food or drop off stuff. That stuff can still happen in 2021, and that's my 2 cents about that aspect.
You know what, and thank you for that. You actually added something, to this conversation that I think a lot about, especially as a mom of an 11-year-old daughter, and that is the fact that the village. I think you're right. I think what's happening is it looks different as well. I think it is expanded, and our kids are digital natives, right? And so, whereas our village were our like immediate neighbors, their village might be someone they've never even met. It might be someone else across the country or, in another location who's kind of like pouring into them and becoming, their little cheerleading squad. Where was your neighbors who you showed the report cards to? And now we're putting everything on social media. And so are many of our kids, right? And so the village looks different. And so, just one thing that we don't have to talk about right now, but that's circling in my head is that how do we as parents then adapt to the changing landscape of the village, and how do we teach our children to appropriately and effectively tap into their village? Because I do think that it probably will continue to shift, right? But that's something else if we wish to touch on that later. But I want to get William in. William, what do you think about this? What is the state of the village in your opinion?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think my dear brothers are spot on, unfortunately. And I think one of the primary reasons at the core is I think people are obsessed with their children. I think people, they just, it's helicopter parenting on 1,000, and it's like nobody can say anything. Mm-hmm. The referee can't call a foul on your kid. Mm-hmm. The teacher can't say that Johnny was having a bad week. He just doesn't seem to be himself. Or then it's an attack on, I don't know where we got this from. I don't know how we became so obsessed with our children, but it really seems that so many people across cultures, across races are obsessed with their children to such a degree that it's debilitating.
Mm-hmm. And you know what it made me think of, and it's something else that Terrence and Mayo were alluding to, is that from my perspective, I think there's been a breakdown in trust. I think that's what it boils down to, is that trust has eroded. And I think a lot of it has to do with the changing landscape, right? When you think, I'm just going to speak from my perspective, growing up in the inner city in Baltimore, right? And growing up in a neighborhood where there was a lot, there was a lot going on. But there was a lot of, we were so, first of all, we lived on top of each other, so we lived so close. We walked in each other's homes. And so it was like the line between like neighbor and family was totally blurred. And now, honestly, a lot of us are moving our families out of the city and we're living in the burbs. And so we're living further apart. Then you bring in the internet, which allows us to be less physically connected. I think there's a lot of reasons why folks are like, oh, you can't say anything to my kids, because they're no longer like the next door neighbors really doing that. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's just from my perspective. I can't imagine one of my neighbors saying anything to my kids because they don't know them. I'm not gonna say I would flip out, but I'm just saying it doesn't even cross my mind. If we lived on Charles Grove Avenue where I grew up, then yeah, Miss Monica could snatch up Caleb. You know, he's doing something he's supposed to do because I know she would know him. But thank you all for your perspective, ladies. Any one of you chime in, and since I know that, especially with Nafisa and Edwina, who are also educators, one thing I want to another question I want to kind of throw in this conversation is, you know, how, you know, what ways do you see parents or caregivers being able to kind of connect with this extended village and help bring things together? What are our roles as moms or as parents?
Well, I know for me, I was going to go a different route, but it was funny what William said. I was thinking about that, like how just, I remember like my dad's older, talking about back in the day, like the teachers like used to paddle the kids. I mean, it was just the teachers were involved with, you know, raising the children, the neighbors. And I think just society has changed that. And like you said, a big thing is just the trust. There's so much violence and so many things going on with our Black and brown children and Black and brown people that I feel like as parents, we're just, again, what I've talked about before is that post-traumatic stress. And we feel like we just have to just wrap them up in a bubble and, you know, make sure we're protecting them, make sure they're prepared for this. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And it's sad, but the times just have changed. And I also think like with the neighbors, people are just overworked and tired, and they barely just, you know, they're overwhelmed just trying to take care of their own children in their own house, let alone bringing in the neighbor's child and worry about what they're doing. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big part of it too, just burnt out and, you know, tired ourselves and trying to just do the best we can within our own little spaces and households, that it takes away from us being able to give importance to our children, you know, our neighboring children, our children within a community.
You raise a really good point, because I know sis is tired all the time. So
Girl.
I'm like, look, unless you can cook for yourself, I don't know if you can come over here. It's like,
Girl, okay. Well, can they come over this weekend? No, they cannot.
I get it. Chantal, I saw you were about to say something.
No, you know, as everyone was talking, especially the gentleman, it really struck home to me because, you know, a few years ago when I owned my home, I remember my kids would be outside playing basketball. Like there was no basketball hoop in our community. And so we went out and we bought one, right? And I would come home every day and it would literally be 8 to 15 boys in front of my house waiting to play basketball with a $30 basketball hoop. And I say that because to me, that was my idea of community, right? Like I'm just being a mom and putting out a basketball hoop for my kids, but the neighborhood kids gravitated towards my house because they saw that I was taking an active interest in letting my kids go out and play and engaging with them. And it happens so naturally. And so we've lost that natural connection to one another. You know what I mean? And that neighborhood feel of, you know, can I knock on my neighbor's door and ask for some sugar or an egg? We don't have that anymore. And so I think there's an aspect of that we do need to get back to, right? Because there are things happening right under our noses, right in our community. You know, you'll hear so-and-so, all kinds of things. I mean, I don't want to talk about anything specific. And then there's that gut punch because you're like, I saw them walk to school every day. Or I saw them playing with my kid, you know what I mean? And so us stepping outside of that box of feeling like we can't trust each other and being open to introducing ourselves and dropping off that food to the new neighbors and having those conversations again, we need to get back to that.
And you know, I always say all the time, like that is one of the reasons that Bgso exists, right? Even though it wasn't specifically, you know, designed to be a parenting support group, but it was designed to be both a podcast and for those who are in the Facebook group, a space where it's, lots of healing and restoration and love and affirmation and community, a safe space where we can learn, like you said, to love one another. First of all, to love ourselves again, right? But to also love one another and connect with one another. And then maybe it's like, oh yeah, you got kids this age. What I heard in your story, Chantel, was that, in terms of what can parents do is, as best we can, is trying to find those times to actually more deeply connect with our own children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because as Nafisa said, I think a lot of us are just, tired and overworked and underpaid, right? And so by the time we come home, we can barely do anything besides feed our own kids and make sure that they get to bed. And so if we can find like those little pieces of time, then I think that we can also start to see that connection being built. Thank you. Edwina, did you want to add anything else to this conversation?
I just wanted to say that I agree with what all of you have been saying. I think that the key is that as adults, like, we don't communicate. And I think the children want to have a village. And I think the children naturally form villages. And I think that the gap is happening with the adults, with the parents. There's a lack of communication happening with between among us as adults. And so it's hard for the children to formulate villages where we can look out for one another children. My neighborhood actually is doing a very great job. I do have to brag on my neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of older adults. And then I think I'm probably like the youngest of the, I guess, parents in my neighborhood. And I have a very energetic son who I know I cannot keep him in my house. He has to go outside. But going outside requires like, okay, I'm going to have to sit there and look at him outside. No, like, I don't want to have to always do that. And so me communicating with my neighbors, and I do have to say, when I first moved in, that was something they greeted me. They like welcomed me to the neighborhood. And so I learned those around me because I knew as a single mother in the neighborhood, like, I'm going to need to rely on other people. I'm not always around. And so my son naturally, he met the other kids in the neighborhood. And one, I had to, I guess, trust that, right? Like, build the trust with my son. But then also to communicate with the other parents in the neighborhood. And so, and we take turns, like, I'll sit on the porch, I'll be the one to kind of watch them. Don't go past that car down there, don't go past, and just don't go crossing the street and things like that. And so it's still there. I don't want to say that the village is completely gone. I do agree that it has changed. It looks different. I do think that even like that old school village is still here. It's just a matter of the adults being open and willing to communicate and bring it back to maybe not how it used to be, but to still have like that comfortable space for children to be able to, like, play outside. I'm just watching on my porch. I'm not going to really open up my home per se, but like the kids, if they're outside, like, I'm watching everybody's children. I'm not gonna, just watch my son if something happens to somebody else's child.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And what it made me think of is sorry. It made me think of, the fact that, like, for those of us who, I think of like be the change, right? So for those of us who know what it looks like or what it could look like, I think that what you're sharing, Edwina, is like, then let's step up. You know what I mean? Let's step up and actually be the change we wish to see. So we want to see that village come back. We want to see folks communicating with each other and parents sharing things like, hey, I saw this. We're looking out for each other's kids. So I like the fact that you said you'll sit outside. You're not just watching your kid, right? You're watching other people's kids. And I think that what you're doing also helps to build trust. Because I know for me, if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, okay, this is someone who's taken an interest and care and concern in my child. And then there comes reciprocity. So then that's going to, encourage me to actually do the same thing. So that's what like kind of really gets me really excited, honestly, about everyone on this particular episode, is that each of us, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but each of us, are actually doing something to be part of the change, right? Whether it's through the work that we do or with our own children. But kind of moving on to the next phase of this conversation. So speaking of the village, another thing that I've noticed and that, comes up a lot is the role of Black fathers, for example. Fathers in general, but we have 3 Black men, so Black fathers. And so what I want to know from you all is, what do you think is unique about the role of fathers, specifically in whole child development? Right, because there are some folks, especially I've seen a lot of stuff coming up on social media here lately about, single mothers, like, don't go proclaiming, saying Happy Father's Day to yourself, and there's been a lot of debate around that. I see your heads going like this. There's been a lot of, conversation about that. And so some folks are saying, that obviously a mother could never fill the role of a father. Like, you can obviously do the best that you can do. I'm a single mother right now, right? So I'm doing the best that I can do. But when I say, oh yeah, I'm their mother and father, no, I'm their mom. And that's what I am to them. So I have to be the best mom that I can be. So I want to know from you guys, I'll start with William. So what do you think is unique about the role of fathers in whole child development? I think it's great to start with you as a therapist anyway.
Sure. Well, fathers bring the balance. And again, we know what mothers do. So we will set that right there and give mothers their homage. But now we're talking about fathers. Fathers bring balance. They bring structure. They can bring peace, right? But this is not just to the child. This can be to the mom, the wife, the child's mother. And we gotta find a way to do a better job. No judgment, because we know relationships dissolve. But something that I'm seeing, since you spoke about mental health, is when the relationships dissolve, the inability of parents to be able to co-parent, it is at epidemic levels. Adults talk about how much they love their children. Oh, I'll take a bullet for her. Oh, I love him. But they can't co-parent to the way that it brings stability and peace. And that lies, and this is the conversation we're having in men's groups and kind of off the grid away from women, that lies a lot on our shoulders.
Yeah.
Forget what you hear men talking about, how, women are acting and their baby mom is acting. We're having a tough conversation behind the scenes that it's what we do. It's how we control the temperature, how we control what we inject into the situation. Because the other part of the conversation is women aren't really wired to take the L. And so when they done gave us a child or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, and then the relationship dissolved, why would you think she could take that L like that and it just be smooth? Ooh. So we're having tough conversations behind the scenes in men's groups. Number one, to try to keep the family together if we can. That's if we can. Once again, no judgment, because things happen in adult relationships, but we gotta figure out a way. Because those of us that are not being responsible, it's ripping these children apart. Now, if it doesn't apply, let it fly, because some people are being very responsible in how they're handling the dissolving of the relationship, the dissolving of the marriage. They're trying to put their butts foot forward. But it's really, it's at a tough spot. It really is. So we gotta figure out a way to do that. And much of that responsibility rests with men.
Yeah. Preach.
If I can add, I said, I'm glad William said that, because as an educator, sometimes I hate that we just try to argue with data, and the data shows that families that have 2 active parents. Notice the difference to what I said. I'm not saying families that have both a man and a woman in the household. Right. But families that have 2 active parents, whether one is in the household or not in the household, but both parents are active in that child's life, those kids are more college bound. Those kids are more already career world ready, those kids do better. I'm not saying it's not impossible. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want that people think it's saying if you are a single mom raising or a single dad raising a kid by yourself, the child's not going to see. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying statistically, the numbers of those kids do better. That's why so many people, so many Black and brown people who come to this country that are not American, who bring in their own traditional values. Why do you think that their kids do better in schools? Why do you think that those kids? It's not because they're the same skin color, they're the same race in a sense. It's because their culture is really big on keeping the family structure together, and so that has monumental impacts on why you see a lot of doctors with African names. Why you see a lot? It's like I'm just being blunt. It's because the structure of the family is built upon keeping this thing together, and even if that means I'm living in America and the dad's back at home sending money, it don't matter. We are going to be active, like in this. And sometimes I feel like it's a very American thing to do for us to separate this household. Everybody wants to. I can't get past it. Like the mindset is once I get 18, I move out. That's an American thing.
Yeah.
That's a very American thing, and there's no rule book that says you because I turn a certain age, I got to get out. I got to get this. I got to achieve that. Instead of you building up like the family structure and building up your wealth together as a unit, and then once you're able to do more, then move out. We just are big on this, just separating. Even just as an American, it's not privy to Black and brown, but the problem is other races can afford to, while we cannot afford to. And so I really wish there was just this push of us to stay together. Me and my wife were having a conversation before. I'm not pushing my son out when he told. I don't care who he's dating.
Absolutely.
I'm not pushing him out until I'm not pushing. Now, do I want him to? I would have an issue if he's 30, still living at home, and he ain't made up for himself. That's on me. Like that's on me as a parent. Right. But I want him. There's no rule that he needs to get out of my house when he's 18. There's no rule. He's not. One of the biggest things I've seen of my friends who graduated from college and went back home and saved up their first decision was when they bought a house. The first time they moved out was to buy a house because they went back home and they saved and they invested different things. But when I asked them what made you do that, they had structure. They had their dad, they had their mom, and a lot of us don't have that. And so last thing I'm saying is I do 100% agree with William. It does fall on men to try to make that situation work. It does. Absolutely. I will say though, and I'm not knocking anybody, and this is not to any woman in this group. Okay. I feel like the tough conversation that is always on the man about why you left your family. And I really wish there was more emphasis on what caused the relationship to strain, and that on the woman's part, and I feel like that's not had or pushed in the forefront. It's always everybody's a deadbeat dad, a deadbeat dad, a deadbeat dad, and I really want to see the narrative shift. Okay, what were both parties doing that they couldn't push it through? Because sometimes I think there is like, and I'm this, and if it doesn't apply, let it fly. Sometimes I feel like if she has 6 or 7 baby daddies, why is no one challenging that? Mm-hmm. I'm just being blunt. Why is no one challenging that when he just is? Why is no one challenging? Is there anything that she could be doing more or better in that situation? And so, man, that's all I'm gonna say.
Man, you guys know you guys are lighting it up, and I appreciate that. I share the same sentiments as my bros, for sure. I think too often, and I'm not trying to be religious here, but there is a word that says, wives respect your husbands and husbands love your wives. And when I'm talking to men, a lot of times what I'm hearing, especially like with all of these movements, is that a lot of men feel disrespected. And what happens when you weren't raised by your father is that you don't know how to respond to the disrespect. And so you do what you were trained to do, which is leave, because my dad left. And, I take privilege in being a dad. I love being a dad. Like, in my mentoring program, I look at those guys like they're my sons too. I open up my home, I have sleepovers. I teach them the elements of being a dad. like you said, Terrence, like I'm an active father. All of the teachers know me, the doctors know me, the IEP meetings, the dances, like I'm there for all of it, right? I can't tell you how many diapers I changed throughout my life, right? I can't tell you how many appointments I've went on, but I'm there for all of it. And I'm usually the first person that the schools call. So in my circumstances, it's kind of flipped, right? And so for me, I just remember growing up, like my dad, he was what I call present but absent. Like I didn't learn any lessons from my father. And so my challenge was I didn't want to be that father, right? And so when I was a young father, I knew that I had to give up something in order for my kids to be provided for. They needed me there. And when I think about when I walk into schools, right, just as a father, not an educator, not as a mentor, I see how other kids respond to me as a dad. Like when I walk in the classroom, just how things change in an instant. And so for me, I know that my presence is needed. I know that it's appreciated. I know that it should be accepted. But being a Black dad, let's be clear, it's a lot of disrespect in this world when it comes to being a Black dad. I know so many good dads who love their kids, but they still find themselves in some sort of system like child support. And you'd be like, man, bro, I always see you with your kid. So why are you a part of this system, right? And again, like, I think that there's some men who deserve that, but then there's other men who would do any and everything for their kid. And there's some, because the way that the world has operated, expect like when you hear single parent, you don't think of single dads, you think of single moms. In the way that this world have operated is like, hey, it's her responsibility to rear this child because she carried it. And so some dads feel forced out. Like, I didn't even know that you don't have rights until you go get your rights as a dad, right? Even if you was there, you watched the baby be born, you held the baby, you don't have rights because that's how the world operates. And so what I would do is always encourage dads, no, be active, because for me, it's all about the responsibility. If I was responsible enough to lay down with you, I don't care if it was one night, I don't care if it was 10 years, right? Despite what we're going to do, I'm going to always be active because that's my child. And for me, because my dad wasn't active, I always think, well, what if something would have happened to me? Like, how would he explain to this world what type of father he was? The greatest gift that any dad could ever have, and the one that I get the most joy of, is one, hearing my kids tell me, Dad, I love you. And that's number one. And when my kids grow up, I want them to say, my father taught me this. And I really do think that that's the response. I think being a parent, whether you're a female or a male, like, your job is to nurture, to teach, to train. That's it. And then to let your kids fly and support them. I don't really look at it as a role. Like, I'm a nurturer, right? Like, I'm also an authoritative figure for my kids when I need to be. If my son fall and hurt himself, I'm going to pick him up and I'm going to kiss him and I'm going to say it's going to be all right. I'm not going to be like, stop crying. You're not like, nah, bro, I'm going to nurture my kid. And if he being disrespectful, I'm going to go ahead and check my kid, right? I don't think there's a role for that. And I really think that the way we teach is like, the father job is. No, the father job is the same job as the mother's. That's it. I'm going to love you to the death of me, right? And I'm going to provide however I need to provide for you. And that's it. And I think it's, when we say this is the mom job and the dad job, we give some men who haven't been trained by their dads, we give them a pass, an easy pass to say, well, that ain't my job. It is your job. Everything's your job. This is, God blessed you with this. This is your blessing to take 100% responsibility for. And I'll share this. I really do feel like some men, because of the lack of their father's presence, not just a male presence, but their father, the reason that they cling to other men and they join things like gang or consistently go to jail is because they're really looking for the essence of that male figure in their life. Because I would much rather be around beautiful women like the ones we have on this call. Me personally, right? Like, I'm going to college because that's where they at, right? But man, when you miss your father, it's hard to tell another man, like, bro, that broke my heart. Like, he wasn't there for me. Or I'm 40 and it still hurt me that I never was told that or appreciated. My dad never said, "I love you," or "It's okay, son," or so it's power in that. And I think that together we're a powerful force, because you'll never have a child without, the egg and the seed. And so it's both of our shared responsibility.
Ooh, first of all, okay.
Listen.
First of all, thank you to all of you. I want to affirm, Mayo, something that you said when you talked about, when we have conversations. And yes, I asked a question like, what was unique about fathers' roles? And it was to spark this type of conversation, right? And so what you shared was that there's nothing unique about it, right? And in fact, that there should be equal partnership in the rearing of children. And to kind of, go back to something Tara said, regardless of who's at fault, for the relationship ending. Like, that's not even, from my perspective, that's not even part of the conversation, because regardless of whether, the father or the man, was responsible for the relationship ending, or the woman, that relationship should have no bearing on the raising of the children and taking care of the children. And I think so, to go back to what Mayo was sharing in terms of, why we tend to think of like the mother's role, dad's role, I think because it has been perpetuated that there's this, like the line is so blurred between the relationship that the parents have and the relationship that the parents should have with their children is so blurred that I think that gives folks the pass. So we broke up, so like I'm out. You know what I mean? And I'm not just out at a home, I'm out of the kids' life. I don't want to help you with this. I don't want to do this for them. And that goes both ways, right? That goes in all ways. And I think that's where I would like to see us kind of shift away from, you know what I mean? That because I just see that too often, that the parents are all in with the kids as long as the parents are together, as long as the parents are getting along. And that should have nothing, absolutely nothing to do.
Healthy.
Absolutely. They should have nothing to do with the kids, because you're right. If our children aren't seeing healthy relationships, and they shouldn't be seeing that relationship anyway. Right. That should just be done. But I know that we are, we could talk about this all day long. So I want to start to wind down with some final thoughts. And I'm going to start with the ladies this time. So final thoughts, I want to know, just what are you doing to be part of the village? What are you doing to be part of the village? Edwina?
I would say my presence. And I'm also an educator, so I think I'm like naturally a part of the village. I was kind of just pushed in there. But I really do look out for children. And of course, I shared the story with the little boy who came to my house at 7:45 a.m. in the morning. I'm thinking something's wrong, and I'm rushing out my bed, like, what's wrong? And he just wants to know if my son can come out and play. That's what he wants to do at 7:45 on a Wednesday morning. But I'm definitely, I just keep my eyes out for children. And so I think that is very important. Just so, like, your parent don't even need to know me, just know that I'm watching. So.
Thank you. Really quickly, Chantal, what are you doing to be part of the village?
Well, my background is in nonprofit business development, so I stay connected to the community. And even as a mom raising 3 young Black boys, I'm looking to be even more connected to the community, because I want to make sure that my children's village is solid, and that there are resources and mentors and things that maybe if I'm not able to provide for them, I know that they have access to. So just being in touch with what's happening in the community, the who's who and what's what, especially as it pertains to our African American children.
Thank you. Nafisa, how about you?
I'm an educator as well. And I think definitely for me, just being involved in my daughter's life, her things that she's involved in the school, drama club, her rec sport she's playing with, be involved with the parents and what they're doing and meeting each other and their children, be involved with the neighborhood. Like, she's at the pool right now with a neighbor because I'm busy. So just being involved in her life and all the little different pockets and places and things that that she's doing. I think that's important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Terrence, how about you?
So I'm gonna say it real quick. I think 2 things. I think what the ladies has just said. Yeah, being involved. I'm in education. I have a mentoring program, so I try to be involved in, in having teenagers and young teens, preteens make right decisions. But I also think a huge part of this is how I raised my household. And I can't venture enough is the fact that if, as an educator, when I see so many broken families, and I think a lot of times we there is importance in trying to fix that and be there for that. But if I can stop this one family from being broken, if I can stop this and having my kids say, I grew up in a household with my mom and my dad, because just like Mayo, I did not. I mean, Mayo said his dad was present. My dad wasn't even present. My dad wasn't visible. Like I found out my dad died 5 years after the last time I even saw him. So my dad was totally non-existent. But I had a stepdad, and I did not value having how much I had a stepdad, because I was that ignorant person. Well, you're not my dad, like, growing up. And him and my mom had conflict, and because you're not my dad, you don't get to have conflict with my mom because you're not my dad. But as I got older, I realized, but he was present and he was there. And when I went home, he was there. If I got picked up in school because there was an incident, he picked me up. He was there. And so there's so much value in that. And so I'm 100% know that I've made it as far as I've made it, because yes, I had a strong mom, but I had an active dad. And so even now when I talk to my kids, when they don't know him as, they don't know he's my stepdad. They know him as Pop. He was my dad. I think that so how do I make sure in my household that I stay present, I stay active, I'm going to be there no matter what happens between me and my wife or whatever. I got to be an active dad. And I think if we echo that, just imagine if then my son is an active dad and then his son is an active dad. It's just, you now have generational change, and so that's what I want.
Thank you. That's dope. All right, really quickly as we close out, Mayo, how about you? How are you being part of the village?
Again, I think, me and Terrence, we're just brothers from the same God, because I'm just modeling it every single day. I let every kid that I encounter know, like, when I walk out of my door, I'm a representation of you. And so I'm leading with excellence. I'm not an educator by trade, but I'm an educator in spirit. And so what I try my best to do is just say, hey, listen, like, good father and good men live like this, right? Not perfect, for sure. Mm-hmm. I make a lot of mistakes, but I take ownership for my mistakes, right? And I let them know what resilience should look like, right? Like, we won't always get it right. And I'm always encouraging youth, just no matter where I see them, I don't really care who it is. Like, I want you to one, understand that God put something in you. Two, you need to live that out. And three, I'm going to be the biggest encourager I possibly can be for that to happen. And like Terrence said, despite whatever has happened in my past relationships, you can still be active, right? There's no days off. Like, this is the job that you signed up for, and you can't quit, right? I don't care if my kids are 15, 25, 30, 40, 60. Like, I'm always going to be a dad. And the kids that I serve as a mentor, but in a dad capacity as well. And I always take that lens. And so I'm just going to keep being active, and I'm going to keep leading, and I'm going to keep being an example. And again, I hope they tell their kids, well, I know a guy who taught me this. And as long as they say that, I'm doing my job.
Nice. Thank you. How about you, William? How are you part of the village?
Well, the first thing is exactly what Terrence said. I'm making sure that home is right and my immediate network is squared away. The second concept is what Brother Mayo shared, and that is I'm really doing it. Like, in other words, when I'm out and about, I'm really giving hope. I'm really speaking life. I'm really connected to people, and I'm really making a difference. And I'm just going to keep doing that.
Thank you. And I guess I'll chime in. So I do, as a mom, I do a lot of what you all, probably everything that you all have already shared, but I'll just share that in my work with educators, what I do, because what was stated earlier is that our kids they spend a lot of time away from us. They spend a lot of time in schools. And so when I'm working with educators, I'm making sure that they're, showing up to spaces that are ready to welcome them and value them and see them, and where they feel loved and heard and affirmed. And so that is the way that I help to positively impact the extended village, in addition to loving on my own kids like crazy. So, oh my gosh, this has been such a really fulfilling conversation. My cup is overflowing, and I wish that I could keep you all for hours and hours and hours, and we could continue. Hopefully you all will join us on another podcast episode. If you are watching right now, then please let us know in the comments what you thought about tonight's episode and whether anything that we've shared really resonated with you. Anything that you agree with, let us know. If you disagree, let us know that as well. And if you are a member of Bgso, then please join us for the live debrief. And if you're not, and you identify as a woman of color, then please join Bgso Brown Girl Sound Off on Facebook. As always, it has been an amazing time, and I hope to see you all again soon. All right, y'all. Peace out.